finishing a note. Welcome to week 12, where everything comes together. We are going to be examining Moonlight at the level of ideology, film language, and the avant-garde. This instructional video really brings everything we've been talking about together, and I literally do not know if it should be an in the reel, since we're going to be testing Moonlight the entire time, or if it's an instructional video. It makes it very challenging. But let's see where we go. I've got plenty of notes and many things that I would love to talk about, so let's begin with the avant-garde elements. I find the sound slips so interesting. It happens 3 times throughout the film. The 2 I'm going to look at is when Chiron's mother is asking to be let into her building, and also that one where Chiron's mother and the guy are smoking drugs in the car. It's strange that the car starts before the guy even gets in it. So I think there's many levels here that we can look at when it comes to these sound slips, which we don't normally find in any narrative work. It feels very avant-garde. One, when Chiron is listening to his mother talk, you can feel those sound slips coming out of an anxiety he has with his relationship to his mother. Clearly, it is extremely challenging because she's a neglectful mom. She's addicted to drugs. She also is homophobic towards him, doesn't honor who he is, doesn't nurture him the same way that Juan and Teresa do. So it goes beyond neglect into almost, we could say, emotional abuse. And part of me starts thinking that he is blacking out the things he doesn't want to hear, or the anxiety is getting to be too much. But I also think it could be the mother's drug taking when it comes to the car, and it starts before they even get into the car. So I find that interesting as a choice because it plays back and forth and you're not quite certain which one it is. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about this film. It's called Moonlight. And we only see Moonlight at 1 or 2 key moments. Most of the time, it's given to us in those transitions where we have that bleeping blue light. It reminds us of the story Juan told to Little, Little being Chiron, the younger self.
Running around, catching up all that light. The moonlight, black boys was blue. You blue. That's why I'm gonna call you. Blue.
Say your name, Blue.
I find it interesting that the story doesn't make complete sense. We have to interpret. And that's what also gives me that feel of the avant-garde. We do not know what that story means. We do not know what it means when Black is being held by Kevin at the very end of the film, and we see that moment where Little looks back at the camera, which is beautiful, but it doesn't necessarily close things off. Is this a coming of age story? Is this Little and Chiron and Black trying to figure out their identity? Is it that kind of movie? Well, yes, there's a moment where it's about identity, clearly, when you have that really awful, hard scene to watch that would make any person who is compassionate shed a tear or two, where Little asks Juan if he is an F-A-G-G-O-T. That is painful to watch. But that is the only moment that I really see carving out identity. This is more, to me, a look at the life of a Black man who is LGBTQI+. And I get that because we have 3 different actors playing Chiron. And in truth, yes, they are dark-skinned actors, but as far as casting 3 people who look similar which I feel like a lot of Hollywood films would try to do. I mean, there's been so many times where you have Hollywood films that show like the younger version of the character and the older version of the character have like the same hair or have the same kind of jawbone or eyes. These three actors couldn't be more dissimilar, in my personal opinion. So I feel that adds to the universality. It's another avant-garde kind of choice, or at least experimental. But, you know, this film is political, so it is avant-garde, as I think that through for you, as we're talking this through. And then there's also the use of lighting that feels avant-garde. I talked about those three, the lights flashing in between each of the transitions from little to Chiron to black. And actually the last ones are red. And you get that because of the anger the character feels. So they're definitely emotional. The first one's blue, the next one's red. They're related to the emotion for sure and where the character is headed. Or what the character is actually coming out of, I would say, with the red one. And the blue is where the character is headed. The lighting is also very impressionistic. It reminds me of Renoir and Claude Monet and Seurat. It's because there's so much that is left out of focus. A scene that I really see that, there's a couple places that I see that in. It's in Teresa and Juan's house with that whole FAGGOT moment. It totally reminds me of the water lilies, the color scheme. You go later into when Kevin and Black meet up in adult life outside his restaurant. The lighting there is also impressionistic. The lighting is all impressionistic. And you feel the pull of the experimental use of light that painters discovered so many years ago. So I find that fascinatingly beautiful, all these avant-garde choices, and we, the audience, have to think it through. We're not handed everything easily like most Hollywood films do. It makes us work, and it makes us need to talk to each other about what we're seeing. Now, in terms of the ratio of narrative to avant-garde, clearly it's much more narrative-based, with just avant-garde or experimental elements thrown in. But those moments make us question. They give us thought. They give us emotion. They get us to think through what the characters are feeling. So, okay, let's move away from the avant-garde. I kind of rambled there, so I hope you're following me. Let's move next into the film language piece. I find the camera work at moments dizzying and at other moments shaky. When we first see Chiron, or Little I should say, being chased by all those kids who are clearly going to beat him up or bully him further, and he runs into that building, it looks like an old, used, I can't get the words out. It looks like an abandoned motel. That's what I'm trying to say. It's an abandoned motel. And when they're running after him, it is dizzying, the camera work. But also when Juan is speaking to one of his guys on the street selling drugs, and the other guy is trying, this customer is trying to get some product off of him. And the camera's also swirling. And I find the camera is constantly spinning in this kind of dizziness of the film. And it makes me think of how challenging it must be to be in the minority in a country that is white privileged. But I feel myself want to pull into ideology, and we'll get there. But also I find the camera work extremely shaky at moments too. It adds to the emotion of it. When Chiron's mother tells him that she loves him, it feels so much more realistic.
Sharon! Hey!
Hey,
Hey,
Mom.
baby. Where'd you go last night?
What? Why?
Well, I'm your mama, ain't I? Why you ain't just come home later, boy? You had me worried about you.
There's some of the shakiness that lends truth to that moment. So I find the camera work to be stellar in this film. Yes, we have our classic over-the-shoulder shots, our two-person shots, but the movement of the camera is quite thrilling at getting at the emotion and the want and the desires of the characters. I think another thing to think about also, because I taught film language and lighting already in the avant-garde, so I kind of like blended the two together. But I think one of the other things, I'm looking at my notes here. Yes, that's it. The word to image ratio. That's what I find astounding too. So much of the film relies on image instead of words. It feels like almost 2/3 of the film is not exactly silent, but without dialogue. It uses a lot of sound, but not words. And I find that interesting. I think that comes out of Chiron himself being so shy. This is not a character that wants to talk. And if we think about it, all the other characters have, or feel like they have, a lot more lines than he does. So it brings us deeper into his world and what he sees and what he feels. I think the other thing I really want to talk about too is the acting in this film is stellar. There's nothing showy about it. That scene that I keep bringing up where Little asks Juan and Teresa if he's a F-A-G-G-O-T, it is so underplayed. It isn't performed.
What's a faggot?
A faggot is a word used to make gay people feel bad.
Am I a faggot?
No. No. You could be gay, but you gotta let nobody call you no faggot. Unless
How do I know?
you just do. I think.
You know when you know.
You gotta know right now.
In fact, the entire time we're watching the film, we feel like flies on the wall because nobody's giving a performance.